Good day, I'm Vincent Saxtetter, and this is the After the Age of Fire channel. This is episode 22, titled What Plants Do with the World's Land, recorded December 20th, 2025. Um, so, in the last episodes, we've been talking about how much energy we can get from different sources and whether we can continue to get this energy long term or whether it will run out. And we went through three major kinds of sources. This is a complete list of where we could get energy. One is coal, oil, and gas. And for now, we're getting around 40,000, 42,000 calories per person per day from coal, oil, and gas. That's almost all of our energy except for food, fodder, and wood. And the question is, can we continue to get that amount of energy from coal, oil, and gas? Could we double it or double it again, as we've been doubling our consumption every 22 years for the last 250 years? Or um, are we unable to double it again, or if and will it eventually run out? Will we have less and less? And perhaps, in fact, what we learned was that even if we could double it, perhaps if we just dug as fast as we could and drilled as fast as we could double our consumption of coal, oil, and gas once, maybe even twice, but very soon here in the next 50 years, we'll find the amount that's easily available, the way it is now, is decreasing, will be decreasing, and pretty soon, at least if we continue to structure our society the way we are now, not spending much effort on getting coal, oil, and gas, um, then pretty soon here we'll just find that there's less of it and it's more expensive at less of it available at the amount of work that we want to devote to it. Um, on the other hand, if we decide to spend half of our workforce on getting more coal, oil, and gas, then there will be more. But just talking about within the framework of how we have organized our society today, within 50 years we'll be at our limit, and it will eventually come down to less than 42,000 calories per person per day. So then the next question was, if we are going to have less of it pretty soon here, um, can we make up for that with other sources? And there are two kinds of other sources. One is wind, solar, and nuclear, the renewables, and we went through those in detail twice, and so far, and there will be one, we'll revisit this one more time, but so far the message is that they require too much of our effort and too much of our resources, and we'll never build more than, say, around 15,000 calories per person per day of wind, solar, and nuclear and other renewables, so they can't make up the difference once coal, oil, and gas become more scarce and harder to get. Um, so the last option, if wind, solar, and nuclear won't do it for us, is our farming and our forests. Can we get more from our farming and our forests? Right now, uh, right now we're getting about 15,000 calories per person per day in food, fodder, and wood. Could we get twice that or four times that? Um, and I should mention that that's that this is just the beginning of this channel's main message. What this channel is really is a prepping channel, saying, okay, when we do find that energy is less available and we have to get more of it from other sources besides coal, oil, and gas, how do you get ready for that day? And how do you prepare your family line to thrive in that situation where there's just a bit less energy on hand? Um, so now I'm beginning a lengthy section on our crops and on plants and how they harvest energy and what we could possibly do to get more energy from our crops and our plants. Um, and I'll be going into detail. Already in episode 20, I gave some overall, I think, very strong reasons to think that we are already close to our limit, um, very close to our limit of how much we could possibly get from the biosphere. At most, we could increase it by a factor of two, but they were based on large scale thinking about our situation on this planet, that we grew up in this particular biosphere, and that it's doing close to the best that it can to provide for the needs of all of its species, including ourselves. And we are adapted to being fed and warmed and clothed by this particular biosphere, and that's and we've done our best for 10,000 years to get as much as we could from it, um, and we're pretty much at the limit. But I wasn't going into the detail of how the biosphere works, how plants work, how they get the energy that they do get from the sun, and now it's time to go into that. And so, because there's an obvious question, which is, um, how is it that out of the sunlight that arrives at the Earth's surface, the world's plants harvest only 1 out of 300 calories. Actually, it's 1 out of 345, but I'll be rounding. 1 out of 300 calories is actually harvested and turned into plant material by the world's plants. Why is it that they turn away 299 calories? And why is it that we only get 1 out of 11 of the calories for ourselves? 1 out of 11 calories that the plants turn into plant material gets fed to ourselves and to our livestock, or turns into wood and things like that. And another question that you might ask is, why is it that for every kilo of dry plant material that grows, another 600 kilos, 600 liters of water are required? Why do plants go through so much water and get so little in return? You go through more than a ton of water just to grow a little less than 2 kilos of dry plant material, say of grain or of dry wood or things like that. So there are two questions here: why so much water, and why so few of the calories turn into dry plant material? And I'll start taking these in hand one by one in the next in a step-by-step process in the next few episodes. And then once I've explained in probably 3 or 4 episodes what the plants do and with the energy that they have on hand, then I'll start talking about what we could do to improve that, how we could possibly get more, and what are our chances, what would it take, what kind of effort would it require, and what are our chances of getting more. And the final result, this is the beginning of a sequence about the world's plants, about the biosphere, and what we can do to get more from them. The final result will be, as I already talked about in episode 20, is that we won't be able to increase it by more than a factor of 2, our harvest, and there's a chance that we won't be able to increase our harvest at all. At any rate, even if we do increase it by a factor of 2, it will take centuries, and an awful lot of most people in the human race will be involved in working really hard to get that extra energy. So this is the beginning of a sequence that will first cover how plants work, how they harvest energy, and then we'll talk about what we could do to help them with their harvest. I'll be obsessed throughout these episodes with energy in particular. There's all sorts of other ways that you could look at and understand what plants are doing, how they work, what they're trying to do in the biosphere, how that works together, or and everything going on in the biosphere. I have a very blinkered vision here. It's just on the energy and some about the water. Okay, so I'm missing all sorts of things. It's but we can learn something this way, and I think we'll learn quite a bit this way. So I'll just take this. I'm just telling you that if you want to, I'm not by trying to get to the bottom of what plants do with energy, I'm leaving oceans of other aspects of plants just unmentioned, and there's a lot, and of the biosphere in general. So don't feel like you understand everything about plants from these episodes or about the biosphere. So, and then once I've covered our harvest and from the world's plants and how much it could be improved and what are our chances with that. Um, I'll have some more episodes about some larger lessons that we can draw from all the content of, particularly this upcoming content about the biosphere, um, and just trying to wrap up, trying to pull out the most we can from that, and uh, that will actually be a springboard into the next content. But this will end once I'm done with the biosphere and with the lessons we can learn from this whole thing. Then we'll be done with the section of this channel called the past, dealing with our exponential growth and our energy budget and our chances of increasing our energy. And by the end of this section, the past, we'll know that sometime soon, within 50 to 100 years, we'll have less energy on hand per person per day than we do now. Right now we consume 46,000 calories, mostly coal, oil, and gas, plus another 15,000 calories of food, fodder, and wood. And it looks like sometime within a century, perhaps sooner, it'll be more like 15,000 plus 15,000. So in terms of the energy, leaving out the food, fodder, and wood, it would be perhaps a third of what we have now. So then the second section of this channel's content will be about the present, about where we are right now in the transition between the exponential growth, the multiplying by 2 that we've been doing for the last 250 years, and whatever comes next. Are we still in the multiplication, still in the exponential growth? Are we continuing to multiply our consumption of everything as we have been and our well-being? Or is that coming to an end, or perhaps it has already ended? And then that's just analyzing where we are right now and where we are in the transition. And then the third section will be preparing what the future will be like, how to prepare for it, and what kind of story we're in, the future. So past, present, and future. So with that, I'll launch into this episode's content, which is about it's about how the biosphere uses the world's land. So, as I mentioned, out of 1 out of 300 sunlight calories that the Earth's land receives is turned into plant material. There's another 299 calories actually that doesn't turn into plant material and does other things like making water evaporate or powering the winds. Okay. So the question you might ask is why the world's plants, only, even though they cover a lot of the Earth's surface, why they only get 1 out of 300 calories. And I'll break it down into 3 parts. So there's a factor of 5 that the calories, 1 out of 5 calories are kept and 4 out of 5 are lost because of land and climate. So that's what this current episode will be about. It's about the fact that the world's best land does about 5 times better than the world's average land. So the world's best land harvests about 1 out of 60 sunlight calories, not 1 out of 300, which is the world's average. And I'll talk about why that is and why we know that it's around a factor of 5. Okay. Then there's another factor of 3, which is the difference between the best land and how good of a harvest you can get in a scientific lab with exposed to sunlight or something very like sunlight. Okay, so you grow your plants in a completely artificial environment in a lab, and you give them light that's pretty much the same spectrum and everything as sunlight, and you find that these plants harvest 1 out of 20 calories, not the 1 out of 60 calories that the world's plants do on the best land. So you bring them indoors, you put them in a completely artificial situation, and they get 3 times better. So overall, these are factors outside of the plant. One is the world's land and the difference between the world's best land and its average land and its worst land, and its climate and seasons, things like that. That's a factor of 5. Then there's another factor of 3, which is the difference between real land and whatever you do in a laboratory. Overall, it's a factor of 15. That 1 out of 15 calories is kept, and 14 out of 15 calories are discarded because of the fact that a plant has to cope with its environment, with the fact that it's not in a completely artificial greenhouse. So that's a factor of 15 total. And then there's another factor of 20. 15 times 20 is 300. The other factor of 20 is things that go on inside the plant. Things about how the molecules and everything work together inside the plant, which means it can only keep 1 out of 20 calories from the sun. So overall, that's 20 because of what's going on inside the plant, factor of 15 because of the plant dealing with its externals, and you multiply that and you get a factor of 300. So today I'll be talking about the factor of 5. 1 out of 5 is kept and 4 out of 5 are discarded because of the fact that the world's plants do not all live on the world's best land. And then in coming episodes I'll talk about the other factors, the factor of 3, difference between a lab and the world's best land, and the factor of 20, that energy loss inside of a plant. I hope that lays out the format. So I expect this to take about 3 or 4 episodes. They'll be a bit shorter, maybe certainly shorter than an hour. So what does a plant need from its land, and from the environment? Well, it needs good temperatures. It needs lots of water, but not too much water, because if there's too much water it will drown or the soil will be washed away. It needs abundant, good soil. It needs nutrients. And much of the world's land is missing one or the other of those things. So let's talk about the land as it is around the world and what that land is like. So let's think about an average person's land. If you divided the world's land equally between each person on this planet, then each of us would have a rectangle that would be 100 meters on one side and 167 meters on the other side. So it would be 16,700 square meters, or around 4.5 acres, if you like acres better. It's like a couple city blocks. You can walk from one end to the next if you're determined. If you walk at a reasonable pace in a minute or two. It's not a huge piece of land, but it's a good piece of land. And then in addition to that, there would be another strip of land that would be not of land, another strip that would be 100 meters long and 35 meters wide of continental shelf. This is the very shallow waters just off the coast in certain parts of the world that are like only 50 meters deep or 100 meters deep or 20 meters deep. And these are very special waters, the continental shelf. This is where much of the world's sea life lives and grows. It's excellent for the world's plants, for sea plants and sea animals to grow in. And in fact, in the last 20,000 years, there was a glacial maximum, and most of that continental shelf was land, actually. So it's just land that's currently submerged. So if you included the continental shelf, that would mean that each person would have a strip that's 100 meters wide along one and 202 meters long. So now let's talk about what's in that strip of land, 100 by 202 meters. Well, first, and I'll talk about dividing this rectangle into strips and what those strips would be devoted to. and again, I'm talking about the worldwide average. I'm pretending that you could take the desert and relocate it, a little bit of desert in everybody's strip, for instance. So I have 100 meters by 202 meters. Well, a 14-meter strip of that, 14 times 100 meters, would be devoted to grains, growing grains. That would be our grain cropland. Another 6-meter by 100-meter strip would be other crops, all our other crops. So all our cropland together is a strip that's 100 by 20 meters. Then our pastures and our meadows are a strip that's 100 meters long and 42 meters wide, so twice as much as our cropland. And about 3 times as much as our grain land. So altogether, our agricultural land, grains, other crops, pastures, and meadows is a strip that's 100 meters by 62 meters. Now you compare that to an average person's total land, which is 100 meters by 167 meters, and you notice that our agricultural land is already more than a third of our total land. We're already using more than a third of the world's land for agriculture. So that leaves another strip of land, 102 meters by 100 meters, which is not agricultural land. And what's that for? Well, 1/2 of that is forest, 1/4 of that is desert, 1/8 of that is sparse vegetation, and the other 1/8 is grasslands, shrublands, mangroves, swamps, marshes, and cities and towns. I think in our minds our cities and towns are much bigger than they are, but they're actually a very small fraction of the world's total land. So 62 meters for agriculture, and another 102 meters for everything else, and then plus the 35 times the other strip, 35 times 100 of continental shelf. So this should give you a rough idea of what the world's land is like, okay, and it should also give you an idea of that much of the world's land is actually not very good, not the best land for plants to grow on. We've picked the best land and we're using it for grain. Our grain land is the world's best land. And that's like 1/10 of the world's land. And then there's all sorts of other land. There's large amounts of desert and sparse vegetation, shrublands, and things like that. So the wonderful thing about the biosphere is that it grows everywhere. It takes every situation, every kind of land, and it just grows. It does the best it can with what it's given. It doesn't require fertilizer to be moved around or anything to be redug or re-architected or anything. It just handles it and grows. But since it is dealing with the problems of all the different kinds of land and all of its difficulties, it doesn't grow as well as the best land. So what's the worldwide average harvest that the biosphere gets of sunlight? And so I'll be talking about the worldwide average harvest per square meter, how many calories a square meter of land gets on average around the world, and then I'll be comparing that to our cropland, our average cropland, and better cropland, and our best cropland. So the worldwide average that the biosphere gets, I'm not talking only about our land, but everything in the biosphere, all the land around the world, is on average a square meter of land gets about 10.4 calories, harvests about 10.4 calories per square meter per day. So a square meter in one day will turn 10.4 calories into dry plant material, or a square meter of land will get, multiplied by 365 days, it'll get 3,800 calories over a year that it will turn into plant material. that 3,800 calories is equivalent to 1 kilo of dry plant material, or 5 to 8 kilos of fresh fruit, or around 15 kilos of vegetables or leaves. So that's how much you'll get in a square meter. And our eyes are probably accustomed to that. We kind of have an idea of how much green stuff to find on top of a piece of a square meter after a summer's growing, and that's roughly the same as what I'm talking about here. It dictates how much lawn mowing you're going to have to do, or if it's a tree that needs pruning, or how often that tree is going to be cut down, and it's this law that says that you'll get about 1 kilo of dry plant material, or some, because live plant material, fruits or leaves or whatever, has a lot of water in it. A few kilos to up to 15 kilos of plant material from a square meter. Let's talk about that in a larger area, because the amount of land that we have per person is about 16,700 square meters, or I'll talk about hectares. A hectare is 10,000 square meters, so each of us has 1.67 hectares, or if you like acres better, a hectare is about 2.5 acres, so each of us has a little more than 4 acres. Anyway, a hectare, an average hectare of the world's land, of the world's biosphere, will harvest about 10 tons of dry plant material per hectare, or since an acre is about 2/5 of a hectare, an acre will harvest about 4 tons of dry plant material on average worldwide. That's averaging over the deserts as well as the best lands. So I want you to keep that number in mind. 10 tons of dry plant material, or 10.4 calories per square meter per day. And then we'll compare that biosphere's average to what we get from our cropland. So our average cropland around the world, grain cropland, which is better than the rest of the cropland, okay, our average grain cropland around the world harvests about 12 calories per square meter per day. So just a tad more, maybe 15% more than the biosphere's average. And it will turn about 40% of those 12 calories per square meter per day into grain. The rest of it will go to roots and leaves and stems and things in the soil. So 4.9 calories per square meter per day. So that will turn into, over the course of a year, that would be around 460, 470 grams of dry grain per year from our average cropland. Or a hectare will get 4.5 tons of grain per year. So that's 4.5 tons of grain, or maybe around 12 tons of total plant material from our cropland. And our cropland is the best 10% of the world's land. So why is our cropland getting only a little better than the worldwide average, including deserts and so on? So I think this is a very important point, and I hope that you keep this in mind in coming episodes. The point is that we actually get worse from our cropland. Then we get a worse harvest from that cropland than it would get if we left it alone. It would do a better job of harvesting the sunlight if we just left it alone. Okay. Why? Well, the way we grow crops is we grow them and then kill them, grow them and kill them. And so that there are long periods when nothing is growing, and then there are periods when after 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 we sow the seeds, that the land is not completely covered with leaves, and so lots of sunlight is going to waste. Um, a second reason is that we grow only one species at a time, a crop of corn or a crop of broccoli. Um, and that's not the way the biosphere works. It has many species, and if one species, and they're all if one species doesn't capture all the sunlight, another one will. They all are getting as much as they can, and the net effect is that they don't let anything go to waste. There's so many, and not at any time, and in every season there's something. You, Typically, there's something that does better in one season, and then gets replaced by another thing later in the summer, and then by something else in the fall and in the winter. Um, it just really, there are so many species working at it that it doesn't let things go to waste. Whereas we have one species, we plant one species, and if it's not capturing everything, nothing does. Nothing picks up the slack. And then a third reason is that when we grow things, the land depends on us, and it's vulnerable to all of our failures. If we make a misjudgment, if we plant the wrong seed, if we fail to kill the pests, if we take a vacation or somebody gets old and dies, then the land will not bring its best harvest. So those are the reasons why when we take an excellent piece of land, one of the most fertile pieces of land, and we bring it under our own care, the harvest is decreased. So you can be sure that the 12 calories per square meter per day that our cropland gets is less than it would get if we left that land alone. So far, we have two numbers. One is the worldwide average, which is 10.4 calories per square meter, or something like 10 tons per hectare. And then there's our croplands average, which is 12 calories per square meter, just slightly higher. It's about the same, or slightly more, around 12 tons per hectare. But of that, only 4.6 tons turn into grain. And then let's talk about places with better harvests, and we'll take this in stages. The first stage is fertile provinces or states, or large-scale areas that run on for 20 or 100 kilometers in one direction. There are some of these around the world that produce extraordinary harvests in a whole province, and one of them is the rice cropland in Louisiana and in the southern United States, where the Mississippi River comes out in a delta. It's excellent farmland, and that rice farmland in Louisiana harvests 8.8 calories per person per day of grain. That's compared to the 4.9 average worldwide, or 8.4 tons per hectare in a year. Compare that to the 4.6 ton average worldwide, so almost twice as much. And in fact, in general, these fertile provinces do about twice the worldwide average. So then we can talk about Australia. Australia has some excellent rice cropland around its Murrumbidgee and Murray River valleys. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but there are two big rivers in Australia, and next to certain sections of those rivers, there's some excellent rice cropland, and that rice cropland harvests more than it harvests on average around 10 tons of rice per year, which is twice the worldwide average of 4.6. Now this is most years. I'm leaving out the bad years, and there aren't that many bad years. So for most years in Louisiana and Australia, get these harvests. Another place with excellent, really great harvests, rice harvests, is the Mekong River Delta in southern Vietnam. Um, and there, in one season, the winter spring harvest, in one season they can get up to 10 tons per hectare. Um, or and then they can have up to 3 rice harvests per year. So it's tropical, so they just have the sun there all year long. Um, this is all rice. Now we can talk about corn for a minute. In Iowa, which is prime corn farmland in the United States, uh, the harvest is again uh, better than 2 times the worldwide average. They get 10 to 14. Uh, uh, I think it's 10 to 14 calories per day just in grain. Um, uh, so that's again 2 to 3 times better than the worldwide average for our grain cropland. So it's really excellent farmland, the Great Plains area. Uh, so so far we have the biosphere's average, then we have our grain cropland, which is about the same as the biosphere's average. Now we have fertile provinces, Louisiana, parts of Australia, Vietnam, the Great Plains, and there are other ones around the world. These are not all of them by a long shot, which get harvests that are 2 or 3 times the average of our average grain cropland. Okay, now you can get even better harvests if you talk about specific farms. So small areas, not whole provinces. And first I'll talk about farms farmed with modern methods, with the big machines, with the fertilizers, with the pesticides, with scientific planning, with scheduling, and everything else. You just pull out all the stops and do everything you can scientifically and technologically for the farmland with large machines, and you can get harvests that are between 3 and 4 times the worldwide average. So there are certain farms, rice farms in China's Zhejiang and Hunan provinces that can get 16 calories per day of rice. So that compare that to the 4.9 calorie worldwide average, it's 3 times better. Or there's a farm, a very very well-known farm in Nebraska in the United States. It's a corn farm. I'm not actually. I think it might be wheat, or wheat and corn. Um, anyway, that farm can harvest. On average, it gets 20 calories per square meter per day, or it gets 19 tons of grain per hectare. Compare that 19 tons to the worldwide average from our cropland, 4.6, and it's 4 times. That farm gets 4 times the worldwide average. It's I'd love to see the place. It must be amazing. In a very quiet sort of way. But we can actually do better than that land, than these small farms. Actually, the beaver farm, and these are farmed using modern and technological methods. They're rather large. I'm not sure about the size, but it's probably the beaver farm is a kilometer on a side at least, as things often are in the Great Plains. And these are big. When you use modern machines, you're thinking big farms. But we can actually get a better when you have a big farm and you're doing it with machinery and chemicals and stuff. That means that the farmer, first of all, there aren't that many farmers because machines are doing a lot of the work, and the farmer is spending a lot of his time and creativity and thought on getting his machines to do what he wants them to do, and getting all the system right to get things to the land and off of the land and so on. And the farmer, I'm sure that these farmers have a knowledge of the land, but it's nothing like the knowledge that somebody would have if he were off of his tractor and digging himself through the land and 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 doing everything with himself and his donkey or something. So these farmers are also too busy to make sure that the land never erodes. Um, they do their best, I'm sure, but they're very busy with their tractors and their chemicals and their different buildings and so on, and their business and so on. So, but if you have somebody working a small plot of land, maybe a hectare, and doing it himself or herself, and going through and weeding and planting and harvesting essentially by themselves without large machines, that person is going to know their land a lot better and is going to make sure that it doesn't wash away, and is going to notice what the condition of the land is and be thinking very creatively about how to fertilize it and so on. And it's been shown over and over again that at times a person working by hand on a small plot of land can get 5 times the worldwide average harvest from his land. So you can get 23.5 calories per square meter per day, or 22 tons per hectare. That's better even than the Beaver Valley Farm. This has been done, for instance, in Bihar and Tamil Nadu, 2 different provinces in India, not close together. Bihar's in the northeast, and Tamil Nadu is in the south, around Chennai. And these were poor people, and these were working small plots of land, and it wasn't the world's best cropland either. It's just that the person really cared, and they were using they were growing rice in this case, and they were using something called the system for rice intensification, which is a set of farming practices that seems to get better yields from the land, but it involves a lot of handwork. So, and it's not just a couple times. It's happened many times around the world that people by paying very careful attention to the land were able to get an extraordinary harvest from it. So this may not be every season. This may be in some good seasons or something, but it's certain that you can get 22 tons per hectare if you give your land some care and you have good, and if providence is on your side. So that means that's compared to the worldwide average from the world's average cropland worldwide, 4.6 tons per hectare. That's fully 5 times the worldwide average. So, and it's easy to check in each of these cases. I've gone through a sequence, and it's easy to check in these cases of different provinces that I gave you in Australia, the United States, or different farms and then different small plots. It's easy to check that these places weren't getting a lot more sunlight than the rest of the world. They were getting pretty normal amounts of sunlight. So it's not because there was a big flashlight shining on Bihar, on a particular plot of land in Bihar, or on the Beaver Valley Farm. They were getting about the same amount of sunlight, and they just were getting a lot better harvests. It's something about the land and how it's cared for. So after this sequence, we can ask, there's one more logical step in this sequence, which is what kind of harvest would you get if you took the world's best land, say the Beaver Valley Farm, and you worked it by hand in small plots with a lot of creativity, and you didn't grow a monoculture. You grew maybe you grew many species at once, or maybe you let it just grow on its own, as it was until we arrived, and but you help it along as much as you can, whatever it is, forest or prairie. You do whatever you can to help it grow better, um, and you don't raise it after every harvest. You let it keep growing. In these cases, what would that land, in other words, the world's best land, left more to itself, but given whatever help we can think of, what kind of harvest would that get? And you can be sure that it would be better than a factor of 5. The improvement would be more than a factor of 5 above the worldwide average, but I don't know how much better. So I can't answer that question. Okay, but what we can be sure is that our best plots of land under the best care do give a factor of 5 better than the worldwide average, either from the biosphere or from our grain cropland. So that implies that well, first of all, those best pieces, that land that's getting a factor of 5 better, that means it's harvesting 1 out of 60 sunlight calories, not 1 out of 300, which is the average. And it also implies that loss of 4 out of 5 calories is because of land and climate. Plants, the world's biosphere, the reason why it harvests 1 out of 300 calories, part of that is a factor of 5 loss just because of land and climate. It grows wherever it can, it grows everywhere, and in order to handle dealing with life everywhere, with this conditions everywhere, it makes sacrifices, and that means a sacrifice of energy. So I'm just, the whole point here was to tell you where that factor of 5 comes from. In the next episode, I'll be talking about the factor of 3 difference between the world's best land, which harvests 1 out of 60 calories, and our labs, which harvest 1 out of 20 calories. And then in the next episodes after that, maybe 1, maybe 2 episodes, I'll be talking about that factor of 20 energy loss inside of our greenhouses. I mean, inside of our scientific labs. Now, but before I close the episode, I just want to say that out of the 3 kinds of energy loss, the one inside of the sun, the world's plants, and the one that has to do with conditions in a laboratory, and the one that has to do with the world's land and the climate and the world's land, the one that we have the best hope of making some improvement about is the one that I talked about today. Our best hope for increasing our harvest from the world's plants is not by changing the internals, not by genes, genetic work, and it's not by trying to move them all into big scientific labs. Our best hope for improving our harvests is by trying to deal with the difficulties that plants encounter dealing with the world's land and its climates. In other words, trying to modify their conditions, trying to improve the land that they grow on. So I'm just saying, in the end, don't expect a lot. We'll cover the internals of plants a lot, but what I talked about today, this is the real area that we should focus on if we want to get a better harvest. And that's what we will be focusing on going forward as we find that coal, oil, and gas are harder to get, and we find that wind, solar, and nuclear are a bit too expensive for us to supply the main way and the easiest way to get more energy will be to focus on our land and try to give our plants some more attention and care. But we'll come around to that sooner or later. I just was trying to give you a flavor of what comes next. But this is a really important, the world's land is really important, and it's going to be a big theme as we go into the later sections of this book. How we manage it, what we do about it, how we get the best harvest we can from it. Okay, well, with that, I'll end the episode, and um, I wish you a Merry Christmas, a beautiful Christmas, a holy Christmas, and I'll see you after Christmas. And best wishes until then.